Assassin's Creed Unity deserves its own remake. That's something that I heard plenty often on a recent stream that I had. By the way, there's a link below to register for my next stream if you want to attend and, hang out and talk about Assassin's Creed with a bunch of people. In celebration of the fact that Black Flag is getting a remake coming out pretty soon, that was like the big question of the stream was, what game do you want to see remade next? And of course, there were plenty of answers you'd expect. You got Assassin's Creed 1, 2, or 3, but Unity was one that I heard somewhat frequently that kind of surprised me and plenty of other people because there was debate about whether or not it really deserved it. And the idea sat in the back of my head, and I couldn't stop thinking about it until later on I figured out why I thought I liked it and why I enjoyed the idea of an Assassin's Creed Unity remake. Whenever the idea of a Unity remake came up, a really common counterpoint was that it wasn't really that old of a game, it was still fairly new. And I feel like I need to remind people that it came out almost 12 years ago. First off, that makes me feel really old because I remember when that game was coming out. And second off, that's a lot longer than it took for Sony to remake The Last of Us Part 1, isn't it? But even if the game was a lot longer ago than I really want to admit at this point in my life, there is another reason why I really like the idea of an Assassin's Creed Unity remake. And that is because the release of the original Unity was kind of like a fracturing point for the franchise and the community at large. Someone who's been a fan of the franchise since I played the first one back in 2008, I think, I remember Assassin's Creed Unity coming out, and the franchise and the community never really felt the same after that. For context, back when Assassin's Creed Revelations and 3 were coming out, people were already saying that they were getting Assassin's Creed fatigue because a lot of the games had the same underlying formula to it. And then Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag came out, and while that was a rousing success of a game, and many people love it and claim it's their favorite, even to this day and all that, there was a part of the fan base and critics that said, oh, this is a great game, but the best parts of it are kind of the parts that aren't really Assassin's Creed, which just kind of fueled the idea that people were tired of the Assassin's Creed formula. But then Assassin's Creed Unity was announced, and it was basically a full dive back into that classic formula, but pushed further than it ever had gone before. And this idea really excited a lot of people to my memory. Then the game came out, and it was buggy beyond belief. For anyone who remembers the launch of Cyberpunk 2077, this was basically the precursor to that. The game was just really unstable, and so for a lot of people, bugs were everywhere, and for others, there were barely any bugs in the game. And this is that fracture point that I was talking about. After the launch of Assassin's Creed Unity, the original formula was kind of poisonous to marketing. We had Syndicate come out next year, but because it just wasn't what people were really looking for in an Assassin's Creed game, it really fueled the idea that, the classic Assassin's Creed was played out. And so from this point on, this is really where Ubisoft started to distance themselves from what came before in the franchise. According to interviews, they were already working on Assassin's Creed Origins by the time this had released. However, the reception to Unity's release gave them the confidence to fully dive into all the ideas they had for Origins as a different kind of Assassin's Creed. And so regardless of your feelings on the RPGs, this is where it kind of all started. If it wasn't for this, the franchise would look very different today. Would it look better? Would it look worse? I don't know. I don't live in that universe. And this is why I really like the idea for a remake of Unity. Because if Ubisoft were to do it right, it kind of would be like an apology, like righting a wrong in history. I think it would do a lot to show that there is still plenty of interest in that classic style of Assassin's Creed game. Mirage tried that. It didn't quite stick the landing, kind of fumbled a little bit. It's one of my favorite Assassin's Creed, but in terms of a public perception, that's kind of what it is. So you tell me, would you like a remake of Assassin's Creed Unity? And like I mentioned before, there is a link below that if you want to register to join the next stream, you'll be reminded and get a little link when I go live. And you can pop by, join in, say hi to a bunch of Assassin's Creed fans, and we can all talk together.